Shifting focus now to Afghanistan and the announcement of the new government by Taliban. It has now triggered a debate over security concerns to many countries. It's also, to some extent, made it clearer what Taliban's intent is. Not that many of us doubted it, not that many of us really bought into their sales pitch about how they are changed, how they're going to be different, how they're going to be inclusive, how they're going to be modern and progressive. None of that. They still continue to say we're going to follow international laws provided it's in line with their own beliefs. Now, if you look at the newly formed Taliban government, the interim government, the biggest takeaway is really that the power stays with those who believe in this hardline mindset and many of those who have close terror links. On an overall basis, for example, Taliban promised that they're going to give all opportunities to women, that they're committed to women's rights within Sharia. But what it really meant is what has happened is that order after order is coming out, from education sector to work sector to the fact that there's not a single woman in this cabinet. No surprises there. They said we'll form a strong and inclusive government. There's not a single non-Taliban name in that cabinet. They said no one will be harmed in Afghanistan. And guess what? They went and found FBI's most wanted terrorist and appointed him as the interior minister in the government. That's what has happened. Most wanted terrorist of one of the biggest terror networks is now officially part of the Afghan government. Multiple issues that India needs to look at. ISIS-K and its links with the HAQQANI network. The fact that now the HAQQANI network head has been given a cabinet berth. The fact that Al-Qaeda has begun to make noise raking up Kashmir. The fact that the entire cabinet itself in the Taliban government has a Pakistani stamp on it. And this becomes another challenge to watch out. We've been extremely busy. We've also been holding conversations, from having a meeting with the CIA chief who is here, to NSA Doval, then further holding talks with Russia and country after country where we are looking into conversations about security. We're going to talk about all of that. Tonight, the focus is challenge for India versus this new Taliban government and what it means. What can India do? What should our strategy be? Let's say good evening to Jitendra Kumar Ojha, geopolitics and security expert, KP Nair, strategic analyst, Professor A.K. Pasha, Center for West Asian Studies at JNU, Deepak Vora, former diplomat, and Jitendra Nath Mishra, former diplomat, also joining us. Thank you so much to all of you for being with me. Let me start off with Mr. Ojha. And Mr. Ojha, to your mind, how do you read this the breakup of this new government by the Taliban? What does it mean?
Is the question for me?
Yes, Mr. Jitendra Kumar Ojha.
Oh, sorry, I missed it because I had lost you for a while. Look, all said and done, Taliban has been created as a proxy by Pakistan, because from 70s onwards, they started drifting in a different direction, and they started using their covert influence. Whether they SIRAJUDDIN HAQQANI or whether MULLAH BARADAR or even the AKHUND, all these have a very strong Pakistani connection. If you see three people who are going to be very critical, because the president, so-called president or Amir and acting prime minister, both of these are religious figures. But three critical people who are going to be very critical. One is, of course, the one deputy prime minister, and Sirajuddin Haqqani, interior minister, and Muhammad Yaqub. Mullah Baradar, Haqqani, and Yaqub, these three people are going to be very critical. All these three people have very strong Pakistani connections. Haqqani, for example, Pakistan ISI used Haqqanis to reach out to Al-Qaeda at one point of time. They continue to have nexus even with ISIS-K, it is suspected, because many occasions where Pak ISI could not intervene, they used Haqqanis, and the older Haqqani was very good at reaching out to various groups and entities. And this person has very strong roots, educated in Pakistan. So is the case with Muhammad Yaqub, the kind of association Omar had. So all said and done, this group does not have the kind of autonomy which we expect from an independent freedom fighters or independent jihadi groups. And their involvement in all shades of organized crime is such that for one reason or the other reason, they will have to depend upon Pakistani ISI. Only thing we expect that sooner or later, these groups have a tendency to splinter. These groups do have interpersonal issues, because if we go back, the circumstances under which Haqqani network merged with Taliban, when they came under enormous pressure and they realized, rather Pakistan ISI realized that Taliban is coming, it's time for them to push Haqqanis into the fold of Taliban. And the kind of, it is widely believed that they had been operating from North Waziristan, two places they have their bases. Miram Shah is one, and then Haqqaniya Madrasa. Haqqaniya Madrasa is one thing which has been giving rise to these people and the kind of network they have. Regarding Abdul Ghani Baradar, it is said that, Pakistani saved them, but on quite a few occasions, he and Pakistan are.
Right, we seem to have some technical glitch there. We're going to get back to Mr. Roja in just a bit. But on this point, actually, let me also bring in Mr. K.P. Nair. Mr. Nair, your view on how should we read the importance that's also being given to...
But all said and done, at this point of time, so like Chinese have been trying to back Pakistan
Mr. Roja,
to every possible means. So
I'm not too sure if you're able to hear me, but we actually lost the line with you in between. So we missed the last few lines that you said, if you would want to repeat that.
So what I was trying to say, that even if there may be some interpersonal issues in days to come, at the moment, none of the top leaders of this Taliban government, especially three key people I mentioned, who really control levers of power. One is Baradar, one is Sirajuddin Haqqani, and Muhammad Yaqub. These three people remain firmly
Okay, let me go across to Mr. Nair then. Mr. Nair, your view on the fact that, the Haqqanis are now officially part of this government.
See, my view is don't go by the past of the Taliban, My view is judge them by what they do. Don't judge them by what the Taliban was in 1996, Every movement, every political movement, every militant movement undergoes changes, There was a time when Yasser Arafat was considered a terrorist. He walked into the United Nations with an olive branch in one hand and a gun in the other in 1973, But a time came when he was received in the White House. President Clinton received him, President Carter received him, they hugged him. If you go back to 1949, many of the founders of Israel were branded as terrorists by the British, So movements undergo changes, It doesn't help us, it doesn't help India's interests to demonize the Taliban before they do any damage. Wait and see, they may well do damage. They may become what they were in 1996. But my view is judge them by what they do, not by what they have said before. And, sensible countries are doing that, Why is Dominic Raab, the British Foreign Secretary, in Islamabad? If they wanted, they were fighting the Taliban, the British. If they wanted to continue to take a confrontational position, Dominic Raab wouldn't go to Islamabad to try and leverage their influence with Pakistan to get a passage to Afghanistan. Same thing with Germany,
Okay.
And the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres is organizing global aid meeting in Geneva on September 13. If the UN, many of these people you mentioned are on the UN's terrorist list.
Yes.
If the UN was taking a position of confronting the Taliban, then Secretary General Guterres wouldn't organize a meeting on September 13th in Geneva to aid Afghanistan.
I have very limited experience, Mr. Nair, but dare I say that I do disagree with you, because a lot of these statements and congregations and groups and international platforms have just been reduced to those issuing statements to say we condemn this, we are concerned, we are very closely watching. Now, the fact that a United States or a United Nations is concerned is not going to make any difference to our lives. We will still have to go out there, design our own strategy and protect ourselves. Mr. Roja, I will come back to you, but just allow me to go across to our other panelists as well. And I want to take this point across to Mr. Mishra, Mr. Jitendranath Mishra. Do you agree that the Taliban government that's already brutalizing, torturing journalists, putting them behind bars, has already decided to lock up women in their homes and put the HAQQANI network founder as the interior minister, is actually going to now bring about will be very different from what they were?
Well, it's very difficult to say that they will be very different. I don't agree that they will be fundamentally different. There will be difference in nuance, perhaps. Now, of course, I agree with Mr. Nair that we have to go by what they do and not what they say. What have they said on India? Very few things. We had Stanek Zai say all the good things, and I think that was more a public relations exercise. He's inconsequential in any case right now, so it doesn't really matter what he said. There was a statement as reported in the Indian media on Kashmir that as Muslims we will speak up for the rights of Kashmiris, but we will not intervene in Kashmir. But it's not up to the Taliban only. What about their benefactors? And I want to mention here not just Pakistan. Pakistan is a winner out of this anyway, but the real winner is the new winner, which is China. Now, China has a direct interest in stabilizing Pakistani control over Pakistan-occupied Kashmir for obvious reasons, the China-Pakistan economic corridor. And going beyond, what about the Belt and Road? Well, if they find an outlet through that 50 kilometers width of territory directly into Afghanistan, and then through Afghanistan come back to Gwadar and perhaps even go to Chabahar, which is a calamity for India strategically. So that makes our opposition to the China-Pakistan economic corridor inconsequential. Nobody in the Indian media, I haven't heard this anywhere, speaks about the real winner, which is China. Yeah. So therefore, it's not proper. I don't think it's really necessary for us to talk only what the Taliban is going to do. But the Taliban can do things against India at the behest of more powerful actors. And that actor is China today, God forbid. And they've got mining rights. And there's a report by Paul Shinkman in USA Today the other day that they are looking at the Bagram Airbase to thumb their nose at the Americans, but it's going to hurt us really bad. Because for China, for us, China is a very consequential power right at our doorsteps. It's not such a consequential power for the Americans in Afghanistan. They do not have a fundamental clash of interests. Nobody is talking about China. And then the two-front war. They want to reduce pressure in Ladakh from China. The best way to do it is be complicit with the Pakistanis, push terrorists into India, do covert operations, and even if the Taliban is reluctant to play that game, coerce them because they have all the cards and they have all the right noises.
Right. In fact, you know what you just said was what I was going to raise next. And what happens, Ambassador Vora? Is there a possibility that the Taliban doesn't fall in line with what Pakistan and China together want? The two new best friends who are already, rolling out the red carpet for the Taliban. Ambassador Vora, is there a possibility that they don't tag along?
Very kind of you to invite me to your channel. I'm delighted. I've just heard what Ambassador Mishra has said. I heard what Mr. Nair said and Mr. Oja. These are people whose judgment I value greatly. Let me ask you a simple question. What if Afghanistan ceased to exist tomorrow? Physically, it was lifted and taken to Mars. Will the Chinese be dancing the Bhangra? Will the Pakistanis be dancing the Bhangra? Who will? And this nonsense about they now have strategic interests, I don't understand the term strategic, that now they are going to attack India because they have Afghanistan. I don't have a common border. 200, 300, 1,000 Afghans will attack India. Did they do it from 1996 to 2001? How many of them came into Kashmir? And besides, My problem is Pakistan. My problem is not Afghanistan. Now this thing about China. Let me assure you, Ambassador Mishra, the Chinese are unable to go to the toilet because they are scared of what will happen in Xinjiang. All their overtures to the Taliban are not out of love, are out of fear. And that kind of friendship doesn't last very long. They are worried that the Taliban will start messing around with the Uyghurs. The Taliban have also said they will support Muslims around the world. Don't you read between the lines? They've also said that China will give us money. Do you see the implied threat? That if you don't, we have said we will support Muslims. So we're going to get in there as we did from 1996 to 2001. Therefore, ma'am, the government that we have in Taliban today is a gallery of rogues. We all know this, terrorists, drug traffickers, etc. Some people say, and I've just heard it on your channel, that Taliban 2 will be different from Taliban 1. Sure, they will be worse. Women are protesting in Kabul against their marginalization. Taliban has ordered that they be shot. Will they give up their rabid, atavistic, misogynist ideology? Taliban said it will be an inclusive government. It is not. They said women's rights would be respected as per Islamic norm. They are not. If you believe Taliban, please believe me, my grandfather's name is Abraham Lincoln. Please understand, ma'am, very, very clear. We in diplomacy do not fantasize. We judge nations, we judge movements by their actions. Yes. And what we have seen so far is not at all reassuring. They have moved from guns to government. Why should they change, sir? They managed to throw out the United States with a combination of a medieval ideology and modern technology. Why should they change? Well, when we win a cricket match, do I change the winning team? I don't. They will not. Therefore, we shouldn't be very surprised. Now, what does the future hold, ma'am, for India? We will manage, ma'am. We've done it in the past. My enemy is a country called Pakistan, which is terror central. It's not Afghanistan. Who do the Afghan people love? Have you heard of that country? It's called India. 99 out of 100 Afghans are our friends, which is the country that they hate, and they have since its creation in 1947. They opposed its membership of the United Nations, is a country called Afghanistan. I rest my case. All this kind of sensationalization is not necessary. We know how to deal with it. The Americans are here, Russians are here talking to us.
Okay, what so Ambassador Vora, may I say...
Well, we neutralize them. Sorry, ma'am.
May I say that you and Mr. Nair at least agree on one part, that we should wait and watch how Taliban acts on ground. Now, you know, while you know that they're not going to be any better, you believe they'll be worse. Mr. Nair hopes it's going to turn out differently. So let me ask Professor Pasha then, where he stands on this debate. Professor Pasha, what is our biggest challenge now that we know what the Talibani government actually looks like? How they act, we still don't know.
Yeah, the new interim government formed by the Taliban was on the expected line, because all the international demand for an inclusive government, you know, I don't think they were inclined to accept that. So it was on the expected line. Most of the mullahs have found place. But you started the discussion with the arrival of CIA chief here and the Russian intelligence chief here. My point is we coordinated our Afghan policy with the Americans to a very large extent. And we have seen how they were dealing with the Taliban in Doha and how they have virtually let us down. So my concern is, in future, we have to see which are our stakeholders, whether it is Iran, whether it is Qatar, whether it is Russia. We need to coordinate with these actors who are likely to play an important role. And we must keep the United States at a respectable distance. Because just a week ago, the CIA chief was talking with the Taliban just before they left the Kabul airport. So we have to be very careful where our stakes are and who are our friends and who are likely to help us in one way or the other. Already Iran has taken a position saying that what outside interference has done in Panjshir Valley, which was a clear pointer to the Pakistani ISI Hamid Faiz's visit to the Taliban regime. So in that way, we need to coordinate much more closely with the Iranians who are equally concerned about the Taliban takeover. Although formally the supreme leader has welcomed the change there, but we have much more stake through Chabahar and all in terms of bilateral relations also and the North-South corridor. And along with that, the northern strategic partner, and that is Russia. So Russia also is an important player. We need to see how these three countries, Qatar, Iran, and the Russians play an important role, and we need to coordinate. You see, let me also mention here that the HAQQANIs have worked very closely through the Pakistanis, through the Saudis, with the Americans. American CIA has protected them, financed them, and done a lot of things. Now they have a $10 million prize on the HAQQANI, but this is just for the show. They knew where he was in Pakistan, and they knew where BARADAR was, and it was at the instance of the United States that Pakistan released this BARADAR mullah who talked with the Americans in Doha. So most of these people have been in Doha, and they have been meeting with the Americans, and they knew. So I am skeptical about what we should do with the Americans because they have their own agenda, which is creating trouble in Central Asia through Afghanistan and also to China, which I think is not in our interest. We have to safeguard our own interest and see how the Taliban policies unfold.
Yeah.
There's no doubt that the Pakistanis have tremendous influence over them, but there are also economic pressures through Iran, through Russia, and other countries. Qatar also is an important player. If the Taliban government is isolated and sanctioned, financial assistance would come along with China through Qatar also. So we need to look closely. The Taliban were in Qatar since 2010. We look the other way around. We should have closely monitored through Qatar and the negotiations. We tend to believe too much on Abdul Ghani, and that is what we have suffered a strategic setback in Kabul, which was completely avoidable. We should have been much more open. And the National Security Advisor led us to believe that the Afghan army is well trained, and the generals whom I have talked, they are very strong and they are capable of defending. All this has gone to the wind. Even the External Affairs Minister, even the External Affairs Minister was not keeping in touch. Both these two individuals, they did not see the writing on the wall as far as the rapid growth of Taliban was concerned, and also the progress of the negotiations which were taking place in Qatar. We should have kept our ears and eyes wide open along with other regional actors instead of just listening to the Americans.
Yeah, perhaps that's what happened, because I was going to say when the Americans told the entire world and made the entire world believe that the that the Afghan army was well supported, well trained, and ready to take on any challenge. We, being in this region and being much closer to the reality, perhaps should have known better. But you raise the aspect of Russia, and we've just had meetings with them. After that, the Russian ambassador to India said that both India and Russia need security and predictability. We also they have highlighted the recognition of Afghanistan government is too early to say right now that they need inclusive government which will satisfy the need of Afghanistan. Obviously, that's not going to happen, but there is obviously a point here. Ambassador Mishra, what role can India-Russia ties play in this entire tango where there's Pakistan and China and Iran also involved?
Well, thank you very much. At the outset, I should have thanked you for inviting me to the show, and I do thank you, ma'am. I'd just like to go back before I answer your question about what India and Russia can do. As far as China is concerned, okay, if China is terrified of jihadists coming into Xinjiang, well, China has managed so far good diplomacy. The Taliban in their public statements have said nothing about Muslims in Xinjiang. They've said about Muslims in Kashmir. So it's a different ballgame. So we have to be careful. I entirely agree that we have to listen to what they say and what they do. It's too early to know what they do. They are not even settled as a government. So that was my answer. Now, China, of course, I was not trying to rake up nightmare scenarios about this, far from it. But that aspect needs to be talked about. That's all I was saying. Now, coming to Russia, here also I have a difficulty. The Russians now suddenly want to talk to us. That's fine, that's good. And there are hectic consultations going on in Delhi. But what was happening 6 months back or 4 months back, they were saying we need to deal with the Taliban. And they were rather ambiguous on India's role in discussions. Of course, several years ago in 2018, they did invite us to the Moscow talks, where 2 of our former ambassadors were sitting on a listening brief in that meeting. But we have been very marginal. And the bottom line is that we do not have good choices. Our choices are bad choices, and the alternatives to bad choices are worse choices, in my opinion. The new Taliban is certainly not the good Taliban, and it may be the old Taliban. We don't know. So I don't want to judge that. We have to be very smart, very alert, and very engaged. So with the Russians, suddenly this newfound interest in India, well, this kind of consultation is good. And I like what Professor Pasha said, which is that we should be talking to the Iranians. We have overlapping similar concerns also with regard to Panjshir Valley and with regard to the Hazaras and other minorities. And we have done it before. Remember, in the 1990s, there was an opposition front which was actively supported by India. We need time to regroup diplomatically and create partnerships to the extent possible. And here, I'm not so sure about the Russians right now. Are they doing a public relations exercise, or are they serious about it? I'm not so sure.
Well, when the experts of diplomacy say that, then it becomes extremely concerning. But I understand what you're saying, because right now everybody is looking at each other with the same, suspicious eyes to say, okay, what are you going to do next, and what's going to be your next move? Mr. Nair, let me come back to you and talk specifically of India and a possible terror challenge. What does it matter to us? The biggest concern for us will be if this becomes a bigger terror threat. Now, is the solution there just to make our barriers stronger and thicker and step up on our own, or is there something beyond that we need to look at?
Well, let me first of all say that I agree with everything Professor Pasha said. You know, Professor Pasha is on the dot, and very few people in India know West Asia as well as he does. But having said that, in reply to your question, you see, Pakistan will always foment terror against India. Nothing can be done about it. I mean, we can confront Pakistan's efforts to create terror in India, but we have to take it for granted that Pakistan will use every opportunity to foment terror. So what do we do with regard to Taliban? You know, India has traditional links with the Afghan people. You know, these are links that go back to British times. We have a lot of soft power. We have a lot of influence with the Afghan people, you know. So our effort should be to leverage our assets in Afghanistan and make sure that Taliban doesn't fall prey entirely to Pakistani machinations. You see, now that they have power, what is Afghanistan, Taliban's interest? Taliban's interest, number one priority is not to create terror in India. Taliban's number one priority is not to allow terrorist camps, Kashmiri terrorist camps like they did there. They want to consolidate their position within Afghanistan. They want to get aid from abroad. They want to get recognition, international recognition. They want UN sanctions to be lifted, you know, and India is in the Security Council. So we have more leverage in Afghanistan with the Taliban that people are willing to acknowledge in public in India. You know, the easiest thing is to demonize the Taliban. But does that serve any purpose? We need to deal with whoever is in power in Kabul because it is in our interest. It is in our interest to ensure that Afghanistan does not once again, under Taliban rule, become a fertile ground for terrorist activity against India. I feel that the government, the present government's policies after the fall of Kabul are on the right track. While we made mistakes, as Professor Pasha said, in putting many eggs in the American basket, we are on the right track. Jaishankar, External Affairs Minister Jaishankar and Foreign Secretary Shringla are adopting a calibrated approach towards the Taliban. You know, they are not saying, like many people say in our public discourse in the media, that, oh, Taliban is a terrorist organization. Let us demonize them. They are not saying it. You know, Jaishankar and Shringla are pursuing a very calibrated,
but Mr. Nair, let me ask you this
approach.
question. Let me ask you this question. What people outside of the government say and all experts say or the media says, you know, for various reasons is different. Governments obviously have to keep in mind larger geostrategic interests. They have to keep in mind larger diplomatic and international relations in mind. But no other government across the world has also behaved differently, except that I see largely two groups. One group that has moved in quickly to become friends or to open up, you know, clear channels of communication with Taliban. The other group, which is still in a wait and watch group. Now, in which group would you rather have us?
Are you asking me?
Yes.
Yes, we will wait and watch. We will not jump into anything.
You would rather have us in the wait and watch
anything
group?
at all. We will certainly wait and watch. Our responses will be and should be dependent entirely on Taliban's actions. If Taliban goes back to what they did in 1996, we will certainly not deal with them.
Okay.
But if this is a new Taliban, if they live up to what they are saying in public now, maybe it is window dressing. But if they live up to what they say, we will deal with them.
Okay.
But I don't think we will jump into bed with them. We will pursue a graded, calibrated, steady approach, step-by-step approach. And we have to behave responsibly because we are a member of the Security Council now. So what we say matters much more than if we had not been a member of the Security Council.
Okay, I'm a little short on time, but I do want to quickly go across to Mr. Ojha as well on this aspect. Mr. Ojha, the question is, do we do the calibrated wait and watch approach? Because there are many who believe we've lost too much time already, we've been behind the curves, and in this region, if our interests have to be maintained, we must move faster.
Certainly, at the moment, we may not have much of an option. We have to wait and watch, and we have to be careful. But at the same time, I would say Taliban cannot be expected to be completely different. All said and done over the years, as I said, Pakistanis have managed to perfect their capacities in the area of covert war. And that area, we have not been all that mindful. And all said and done in this region, the entire geopolitical equilibrium has shifted. It has transitioned to our great disadvantage. And I would also say that even if Taliban wishes to focus on internal issues of governance, Taliban may not have that kind of option because of the kind of control Pak ISI has and the kind of agenda China has. So I don't think that in international relations, everything can be solved only by talking and negotiations. You need very robust capacities to address certain situations. And in this area, we have certainly been found wanting.
All right, I am completely out of time, but it's been a pleasure to have all of you on this panel with your insights. Thank you for joining me and sharing your time. We have to wait and watch to see what happens from here on. But I don't believe Taliban is going to be any better. All the initial signs of real action by them on ground goes on to show you cannot take their word seriously. All of their tall claims about equality, about giving platform, about inclusivity, about maintaining relations, all of that is complete contrast to what they're doing on ground. Stopping women from stepping out, separating men and women in education to work fields, stopping women from participating in sports, including terrorists and terror group related people in their government, not including various segments of the Afghani people or their representatives, but sticking to those who are the hardliners like they are. It's a Taliban government. One should not have expected anything different. The only thing to now look out is to what extent are China and Pakistan able to squeeze out this Afghan government and the Afghani soil against India and our interests? And can we then draw up a strategy to counter that? Thank you for joining.